So I was scrolling through Twitter a few days ago, and I saw this. This is the Railway Series iceberg made by the Chairlord on Twitter. And I know TrainBrain06 already made a video on the Thomas the Tank Engine iceberg, which is a really good video, by the way. I definitely recommend you go check it out. However, this iceberg is on specifically Railway Series stuff. I have done a lot of research for this, so I just thought I might as well make a video on this. So let's dive in. Scruffy's death. I'm going to assume that this is talking about how in the Railway series, Scruffy is never confirmed to be rebuilt or even still be alive, whereas in the TV series, he's shown to be rebuilt at the end of the episode. So it's more than likely safe to assume that he was scrapped. 87546 and 98462. These are the two blue engines that appeared in the first illustration of the Railway series. If I'm not mistaken, they were put on loan during the locomotive crisis on the Northwestern Railway during the 1920s. According to Audrey, they were sent away for being rude to the other engines. 2 Henrys. This is a fan theory that implies that Henry Mark II is a whole new engine from Henry Mark I, implying that Henry Mark I was replaced by Henry Mark II. I honestly don't know how to feel about this theory. On one hand, it does kind of make a little bit of sense, but on the other hand, it's just very, very unnerving to think about. The Andrew Lloyd Webber pilot. After the failure of the sad story of Henry pilot in 1953, a man named Andrew Lloyd Webber attempted to adapt the Thomas the Tank Engine stories in 2D animation similar to an animation style of Ivor the Engine. This never saw the light of day, however. As black as redacted. In early versions of Henry's sneeze, Audrey wrote a racial slur to compare to the black soot that came out of Henry's funnel. I honestly can't say that I'm surprised, considering the fact that this story was released in the 1950s, and as we all know, society was a completely different place back then. Mike used to be green. I'm not 100% sure if this is actually canon or not, but supposedly Mike was painted green before he came to the Yarlsdale Railway, and he was supposedly repainted red to not get confused with Rex. The sad story of Henry 1953. We all know this one well, but for those who somehow don't know, in 1953, there was supposed to be a pilot aired on the BBC, and it was supposed to be an adaptation of the sad story of Henry. This failed, however, because of the fact that it was live broadcasted, and during the broadcast, the Henry model derailed and a hand had to pick it up and put it back on the tracks. This obviously made headlines, and the pilot was eventually cancelled. Farquhar pronounced Farquhar. There has been some debate in the fandom on how Farquhar is actually pronounced. I personally think it's pronounced Farquhar. Several fat controllers. I'm pretty sure this is referring to how there have been various fat controllers throughout the timeline of Thomas and in the Railway series, although this is probably because of the fact that the previous Sir Topham Hatt would retire and pass down the name to his son. All the puns in Stepney the Bluebell engine. I don't know what this is referring to. The walloping? I probably pronounced that wrong. I think someone mentioned in a comment that this is referring to the punishment that the boys in Old Iron that messed with James's controls got, although I could be completely wrong. Rule 55. I believe Audrey briefly mentioned this in an interview, and from what I was able to gather, this is a real rule on railways that states that if an engine is brought to a standstill 3 minutes in view of clear or bad weather, the driver must dispatch any fireman, shunter, or any person on the train and to go to the signal box to ensure that the signalman was aware of the presence of the engine. World War II time skip. Henry the Green Engine takes place from 1934 to 1935, and Toby the Tram Engine, the next book, takes place in the 1950s. It's unknown what happens in between that time period. Obviously, World War II happened, but it's never established what happens in World War II in terms of Sodor. From what the Unlucky Tug said, the Barrow Blitz did happen, which is where Germany bombed Barrow and Furness, but other than that, it's not exactly known what exactly happened during World War II in terms of Sodor. Bill and Ben being on Sodor long before Toby arrived. I mean, Bill and Ben came to Sodor in 1948, so yeah. Sodor Oils Ltd. I couldn't find anything relating to this other than the take-along Sodor oil tanker, but yeah. Thomas and the Tunnel Mouse. Again, I looked it up and I couldn't find anything relating to it. Spiritual significance of the workshop engines. The workshop engines are cameo appearances in Trouble in the Shed. When Stubhack goes to the workshop, he goes to buy Percy. However, there's a bunch of background engines, and they're never named. As for the spiritual significance part, I have no idea. Quarry Coach. I believe this entry is referring to this image, which is an image of the Reverend Audrey's original Henrietta model, but when he replaced it, he then labeled this coach as the Quarryman's Coach. Super Rescue photographs. According to Luke Ryan, Reverend Audrey wrote in the forward message for Enterprising Engines that Richard had sent him a few images of a steam engine rescuing 2 failed diesel engines, and apparently that's what he used as inspiration. Audrey and Dalby in Domeless Engines. I looked in every single illustration in Domeless Engines for this, and I couldn't find it. If someone does find it, please contact me and tell me through Instagram or Twitter. The Toby Jug. I think I've heard of this story before, but I don't know much about it. Audrey left the refreshment lady behind. Peter Sam and the refreshment lady is based off of a real-life event that Audrey had experienced whilst visiting the Thailand Railway, where a train apparently had left a refreshment lady behind. Apparently there are real-life pictures of this incident, however, I unfortunately couldn't find them. Henry's buffers? What? The Red Engine Collective Hallucination. There are 2 red engines that aren't James in the Railway series. One of them being shown in the first illustration of the 3 railway engines, whose name I believe is Alid Greedy, and the other one being a James-looking engine that tried to push Henry out of the tunnel in the sad story of Henry. And his name, at least the one given by the fandom, is Eagle or Winston or whatever. And as for the collective hallucination part, I have no clue. Atlantic Henry and Rev's sketches. In Wilbur Audrey's original sketches for the 3 railway engines, Henry is drawn with a 442 wheel configuration as opposed to the correct 462, making him more reminiscent of a C1 Atlantic. The PR Wickham models. I'm sure we've all seen these photos floating around. Apparently, a modeler named Peter R. Wickham was commissioned by a guy called Edmund Ward, I think I'm saying that correctly, to make models of the main 6 characters from Thomas. I would have actually loved to see these guys in action. I'm wondering if they're still around today. I doubt it though. Kildane Satanic Stones. Whew, geez. So apparently, Kildane translates to the Church of the Devil, and there apparently exists a circle of standing stones where a bunch of people would come to worship the occult on Sodor. If you want to see a more in-detail video about this, I would highly recommend you check out Trainboy's video on this. 460 James. This entry is referring to this illustration error from Paint Pots and Queens where James is very incorrectly depicted as a 460 rather than a 260. Real quick though, I just want to ask, what was it again? Oh yeah, how do you mess something up like this? The Little Western Engines. My theory is that Wilbur Audrey was originally going to write a book about the Little Western Engines, since he did write books on the mainline engines, and the Farquhar branch, and the Brendan branch, so why wouldn't he make a book on the Little Western Engines? This never came to be, however. That's just a theory though, and if I'm mistaken, again, please contact me. Eric Marriott and Gordon share noses. Yeah, I see it. Ghost Train television program. In the story Ghost Train, Percy tells a ghost story to Thomas and Toby that he heard from his driver. Thomas and Toby obviously don't believe him, and Percy then tells his driver that they don't believe him. His driver then laughs and says that it was a made-up ghost story he saw on television. It's never exactly specified what he saw on TV to tell Percy this, but I would really like to see maybe, I don't know, some sort of interpretation of what maybe he saw. Percy being able to go along the tramway in branch line engines. I don't know what this is referring to. My guess is that this is referring to this illustration from Percy's predicament where he's on the tramway. The full Bencombe tunnel story. This entry is referring to this line from Leaves. Sodor history lectures. Apparently, Wilbur Audrey would go to universities and give lectures on Sudrian history. Holy crap, I would have loved to see something like that if he was still alive. The loop line dimensional rift. So, do y'all remember in James and the Express when a supposed loop line was mentioned that brought Gordon back to the station? Well, I don't see it anywhere on the Railway Series map. I don't see a possible loop line anywhere. And remember, this is going off the Railway Series map. So, basically, this is referring to a loop line that doesn't even exist, apparently. At least 80 engines on the Northwestern Railway. Yeah, there's at least 80 engines on the Northwestern. London Station Parallel Universes. I don't know what this is referring to, but I have a feeling this has at least something to do with the argument that Gordon, Duck, and the Foreign Engine have at the beginning of Gordon Goes Foreign about the station at London. I could be wrong, though.